At a party with my wife's friends, I tried to kiss my wife while dancing. She replied, "I'd rather kiss my dog than kiss you." Everyone laughed, but they quickly shut up when they heard my answer. All right, let me paint you a picture of my life before everything went sideways in the most spectacular, karma-infused way possible. I'm Daniel Cross, 41 years old, and I build skyscrapers for a living. Yeah, actual skyscrapers. The kind of buildings you see in downtown skylines that make tourists stop and take photos while blocking the entire sidewalk. I've got my professional engineer license, 15 years of experience, and I've literally designed structures that can withstand earthquakes, hurricanes, and apparently everything except my wife's social circle. But here's the kicker. According to close friends, I'm about as exciting as watching paint dry on a Tuesday afternoon in February. Never mind that I'm responsible for making sure hundreds of thousands of people don't plummet to their deaths when they're sipping overpriced lattes on the 47th floor. Nope, that doesn't qualify as fun when you're competing with guys who post shirtless gym selfies and talk about their cryptocurrency portfolios like they're modern-day philosophers. My wife, Chloe, is 36 and works as a marketing executive for some boutique firm that specializes in making rich people feel even better about themselves. She's legitimately gorgeous. I'm not even being biased here. We're talking magazine cover beautiful with a smile that could probably convince a loan shark to forgive your debt. She's confident, sharp, and has this way of walking into a room that makes everyone immediately check their posture. I fell for her hard back in the day, like embarrassingly hard. We met at a charity fundraiser where I was the awkward engineer in the corner nursing a beer, and she was the woman who actually came over and talked to me, instead of treating me like furniture. Back then, she thought my whole strong, silent type who builds things vibe was attractive. Now I'm just the guy who doesn't understand why we need to spend $300 on a single dinner so she can Instagram it with 17 different filters and hashtags about #living my best life. The irony is that I actually make pretty decent money. Civil engineers who work on major commercial projects aren't exactly scraping by, but apparently money only counts if you spend it loudly enough for other people to notice. Her friends, though, oh man, her friends are something else entirely. Picture this, a collection of women who treat every social gathering like it's an audition for a reality TV show that doesn't exist. We're talking designer handbags that cost more than my first car, heels so high they're basically stilts, and enough perfume collectively to knock out a small elephant. They speak in this weird code where every compliment is actually an insult, and every insult is wrapped in so many layers of "just kidding" that you need a decoder ring to figure out what the hell they actually mean. And the volume. Jesus Christ, the volume. These women don't have conversations, they have competing monologues. Someone will be talking about their Pilates instructor, and before they can finish, another one jumps in about their new juice cleanse, and then someone else starts going on about how their husband just surprised them with a trip to Napa. And it's just this constant escalation of who can outbrag everyone else while pretending they're being humble. Oh, it's nothing really, just a little weekend getaway to wine country in our friend's private jet. Yeah, super relatable, Jennifer. The empathy level in this group hovers somewhere around absolute zero. I watch group chat. These are the people my wife considers her closest friends, her tribe, as she likes to say. I call them the Prosecco piranhas in my head because they smile real pretty while they're circling and waiting for someone to show weakness. Me? I'm a simple guy with simple pleasures. Give me a Saturday afternoon with a grill, some quality steaks, a cold beer, and sweatpants that have seen better days, and I'm in heaven. I don't need to document it for social media. I don't need validation from people I barely like. I just want to enjoy the moment without performing it for an audience that's only half paying attention anyway because they're too busy planning their own posts. But love makes just habit or fear of change, or that weird sunk cost fallacy where you've already invested so much time that walking away feels like admitting defeat. So I keep showing up to these ridiculous parties, these soirees and get-togethers that are really just excuses for everyone to flex on each other while pretending they're having fun. I stand in corners nursing drinks I don't really want, nodding politely while someone's husband explains his new sports car to me like I'm supposed to be impressed that he overpaid for a vehicle that's completely impractical for city driving. I smile through conversations about vacation homes and private school admissions and which country club has the best Sunday brunch. I bite my tongue when they make little digs at me, those jokes that aren't really jokes about how I'm so serious or so practical, or my personal favorite, so different from us. Different, that's their polite way of saying I don't belong. And you know what? They're absolutely right. I don't belong in this weird, shallow, performative world where people measure their worth by Instagram likes and designer labels. I belong in the real world, where buildings need to actually stand up, and people do actual work, and conversations have substance beyond comparing notes on which influencer is problematic this week. But I kept showing up anyway, because Chloe wanted me there. And I was still operating under the delusion that marriage meant supporting your partner even when it made you want to fake your own death. I played the role of the boring husband, the guy who doesn't quite fit, the one her friends could safely mock because I was supposed to just take it with a smile and be grateful I was included at all. This particular party, though, this one was different. This was the one where I finally hit my limit, where something inside me just snapped like a dry twig, where I decided that maybe, just maybe, I was done being everyone's punching bag. This was the party that would flip my entire life upside down, shake it around, and reassemble it into something I actually recognized. This was the party where I remembered that I'm a guy who literally builds skyscrapers, and if I can handle that kind of pressure, I can sure as hell handle a room full of people who peaked in high school and never got over it. So, buckle up, because what happened next is the kind of story that spreads through social circles like wildfire. The kind that people whisper about at other parties. The kind that makes you either a legend or an outcast, depending on whose side you're on. Spoiler alert, I became both. And honestly, I've never been happier. So, Jennifer, Chloe's self-proclaimed best friend and the unofficial queen bee of this ridiculous social hive, decided to host what she called a Friday soiree. Let me translate that for you in terms normal people can understand. It was a Friday night party, but calling it a soiree made it sound fancier and justified the fact that she was going to spend 3 days preparing for it and approximately $4,000 on decorations that would get thrown away the next morning. Because heaven forbid you just invite people over for drinks and snacks like a regular human being. No, no, no. Everything had to be an event, a production, a carefully curated Instagram story that would make everyone else feel inadequate about their own lives. Jennifer lives in one of those modern farmhouse-style homes that's about as authentic as a $3 bill. You know the type. Shiplap everywhere, those weird metal letters spelling out gather or blessed on the walls, and approximately 700 throw pillows on every piece of furniture. Her husband, Mark, is this guy who works in finance and has the dead eyes of someone who stopped caring about life somewhere around his 30th birthday. I actually feel bad for Mark sometimes. He's not a bad dude, just completely beaten down by years of being married to someone who treats him like an accessory that needs to match her aesthetic. The party invitation came via a group text, naturally, because apparently we're all teenagers again. Friday soiree at our place, cocktail attire, can't wait to see everyone. I showed the text to my buddy Dave from work, and he literally said, "Bro, that sounds like hell. Just tell them you have food poisoning." Solid advice, but Chloe would have murdered me in my sleep if I tried to bail. So Friday rolls around and I'm getting ready, trying to figure out what exactly cocktail attire means for a party at someone's house. Does that mean a full suit? A blazer? A tux made of diamonds? I honestly had no idea. And when I asked Chloe, she was already in full panic mode about her own outfit, treating her closet like it was a hostage situation. She had clothes thrown everywhere, and I counted at least 6 different dresses laid out on the bed like she was preparing for a fashion show instead of going to Jennifer's house where we'd all seen each other a million times before. I made an executive decision and went with dark jeans and a crisp button-up shirt. Clean, put together, but still me. I'm not showing up in a 3-piece suit to eat cheese cubes and pretend to care about someone's opinion on the latest Netflix documentary. That's where I draw the line between being supportive and completely abandoning my dignity. When Chloe saw what I was wearing, her face did this thing where it tried to smile, but her eyes were screaming. You know that look, right? Where someone's mouth says, "That's fine," but their entire energy says, "You've disappointed me on a fundamental level." She gave me the once-over like a drill sergeant inspecting a recruit who showed up wearing flip-flops. "Oh," she said, and that one syllable carried more judgment than an entire Supreme Court ruling. "You dressed casual." The way she said casual made it sound like I'd shown up in a bathrobe and Crocs. I looked down at myself. Clean jeans, no holes, no stains, a button-up shirt that I literally ironed, which should count for something because I hate ironing more than I hate rush hour traffic. Nice shoes, not sneakers. I thought I looked pretty decent, honestly. "I'm sorry," I said, matching her fake smile with one of my own. Was I supposed to wear a tux for Jennifer's air fryer demonstration? Because, yeah, Jennifer had mentioned in the group chat that she was going to show everyone her new air fryer and the amazing things she'd been making with it. An air fryer at a cocktail party? The woman has a net worth that could probably fund a small country, and she's excited about a kitchen appliance that costs $60 at Target. A couple of her friends who were already there, Brittany and Amanda, I think, honestly, they all blur together, giggled in that awkward way people do when they witness someone getting roasted but don't want to seem like they're taking sides. One of them, I'm pretty sure it was Brittany, whispered to Amanda, "He's funny," and Amanda whispered back, "He's trying too hard." They weren't exactly quiet about it either. I heard every word, and I'm pretty sure they meant for me to hear it, because that's how this group operates. Everything is passive-aggressive. Everything is a test, and everyone is constantly being evaluated on some invisible social scorecard that only they understand. So yeah, the night was off to an absolutely beautiful start. I could already tell this was going to be one of those evenings where I'd spend 4 hours wondering why I didn't fake that food poisoning Dave suggested. We walked in, and the house was exactly as ridiculous as I'd expected. Jennifer had gone full-on Pinterest mom with the decorations. There were string lighting meat and cheese that we arranged to look pretty, and these specialty cocktails with names like Jennifer's Mule and the Soiree Sipper. I grabbed a beer from a bucket because I'm not drinking something called a soiree sipper, even if you paid me. Mark was already at the bar area, 2 glasses deep into something that looked stronger than his will to live. When he saw me, his eyes lit up like I was a rescue helicopter and he'd been stranded on a desert island. "Daniel, thank God, another guy." He grabbed my shoulder like we were war buddies reuniting after battle. "You want to see my new grill? I just got it installed on the deck." Now, Mark's new grill was probably the most genuine conversation I was going to get all night. So I said, sure. We headed outside, and for about 15 glorious minutes, we talked about BTUs and temperature control and the best way to get a proper sear on a ribeye. This is what normal dude friendship looks like. No performances, no judgment, just 2 guys appreciating quality outdoor cooking equipment. But of course, it couldn't last. Chloe came outside with that look on her face that meant I was being antisocial, which apparently translates to not standing in a circle of her friends while they all talk over each other about things nobody actually cares about. "Daniel, honey, come inside. Everyone wants to catch up with you." Nobody wanted to catch up with me. Nobody ever wanted to catch up with me at these things. They wanted me inside so I could be the boring husband standing next to the pretty wife, completing the picture of her successful life. Inside, the party was in full swing. Music was playing, some top 40 playlist that Jennifer probably titled Classy Vibes or something equally ridiculous. The women were all clustered together, wine glasses in hand, laughing at volumes that suggested they'd already been drinking for a while. And an extended discussion about a mutual friend who wasn't there and therefore was fair game for gossip. I stationed myself near the snack table, because at least there I had something to do with my hands and a legitimate reason not to participate in conversations. I was working my way through what was actually a pretty solid buffalo chicken dip when Brittany cornered me. Brittany is the one who I'm pretty sure is having an affair with her personal trainer, but nobody says anything about it, because that would require actual honesty in this group. "Daniel, you're so quiet. What do you think about the election?" She asked this like she was setting a trap, which she probably was. Any answer I gave would somehow be wrong. If I engaged seriously, I was being too intense. If I deflected with humor, I wasn't taking things seriously enough. If I said I didn't follow politics closely, I was uninformed. It was a no-win situation. "I think I'm just here for the buffalo chicken dip," I said, holding up my plate like evidence. "This is actually really good. Did Jennifer make this?" Brittany laughed that fake laugh that means, "You're dodging my question and I'm annoyed, but I'm going to pretend I think you're charming." Then she turned to Chloe. "He's so funny, Chloe. You're so lucky." The words said one thing, but her tone said something else entirely. It said, "I would never tolerate a husband like this." Chloe's smile got tighter, which I didn't even think was possible at this point. I could feel the tension radiating off her like heat from asphalt in August. I was already in trouble, and the night had barely started. That's when I realized that this particular Friday soiree was going to be different from all the others. I could feel it in the air, like the weird pressure change before a thunderstorm. Something was coming, and whether I was ready for it or not, it was going to change everything. About 2 hours into this circus of a party, after I'd eaten enough buffalo chicken dip to require a medical intervention, and listened to at least 3 different conversations about kitchen backsplash tiles, the music suddenly shifted. Up until this point, it had been that generic party playlist background noise that nobody actually listens to, just filling the awkward silence between forced conversations. But then, Jennifer, who had apparently appointed herself DJ for the evening, because of course she had, put on some early 2000s pop song that made all the women in the room lose their collective minds. I'm talking full-on squealing, the kind of sound that probably had dogs in a 3-block radius losing it. "Oh my God, I haven't heard this in forever," someone shrieked. "This was our song in college," another one yelled. Suddenly, it was like I'd been transported back to some sorority house reunion I never asked to attend. These women, all in their mid-30s, were acting like they'd just discovered the fountain of youth in the form of a song that was probably playing at every mediocre wedding and bar mitzvah back in 2003. Chloe's face completely lit up, which was the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her all night that wasn't related to judging my outfit or being annoyed at my existence. "I love this song," she announced to nobody in particular, which is classic Chloe. "Every statement is a declaration. Every opinion is a press release." She immediately grabbed Brittany's hand, and they started doing that thing women do, where they dance in a circle, facing each other, pointing at each other during certain lyrics like they're in a music video. The living room, which Jennifer had carefully arranged with furniture that probably cost more than my truck, suddenly transformed into a makeshift dance floor. Couches were pushed aside by husbands who looked both exhausted and resigned to their fate. Mark caught my eye and mouthed, "Help me," while his wife dragged him into the dancing circle. Poor bastard looked like he was being led to his execution. Now, I'm not a big dancer. Never have been. I've got 2 moves: the awkward shuffle, and the even more awkward shuffle with occasional arm movement. But watching Chloe actually smile, actually look happy for the first time in what felt like months, something in me decided to be optimistic. Maybe this could be a moment, you know? One of those spontaneous party moments that couples talk about years later. Remember when we danced at Jennifer's party? Maybe I could be the husband who didn't just stand against the wall like a security guard at a museum. So I did something either really brave or really stupid, depending on how you look at it. I walked over to where Chloe was dancing with her friends, and I gently took her hand. "Come on," I said, trying to sound playful, trying to channel some version of myself that existed back when we first started dating and everything wasn't so complicated and exhausting. "Dance with me." She looked at me like I'd just asked her to explain quantum physics while juggling flaming chainsaws. Her friends went quiet for a second, that kind of silence that happens when something unexpected occurs and nobody knows quite how to react. Then Chloe rolled her eyes in that exaggerated way that was clearly meant to be seen by everyone watching and said, "Fine." Like I'd just asked her to do the dishes instead of inviting her to dance at a party specifically designed for this kind of thing. But she humored me. And for those first few seconds, it actually felt good. I pulled her close, my hand on her waist, and we swayed to the music like actual married people who actually liked each other. She even leaned in a little bit, and for a moment, just a brief, fleeting moment, I remembered why I fell in love with her in the first place. She smelled like that perfume she always wore, the expensive one I couldn't pronounce. Her hair was soft against my cheek. The music was actually pretty decent once you got past the nostalgia factor. I got caught up in it, in the feeling of being close to my wife without some wall of tension between us. Maybe it was the beer I'd been nursing. Maybe it was the relief of finally doing something at this party that didn't feel like torture. Or maybe it was just nostalgia for a time when things between us were simple. Whatever it was, I made a decision that seemed romantic in my head, but turned out to be the social equivalent of stepping on a landmine. I leaned in to kiss her. Not some dramatic, passionate kiss like we're in a movie, just a simple, sweet kiss between a husband and wife dancing at a party. Normal couple stuff, right? The kind of thing that should be perfectly acceptable and maybe even a little cute. That's when Chloe decided to absolutely detonate my entire existence. She pulled back like I'd just tried to bite her, her face scrunching up in this expression of pure disgust that I'd never seen before. Not even that time I forgot to take out the trash for 2 weeks and our kitchen smelled like a biological weapon. And then, in a voice loud enough for absolutely everyone to hear, in a room that had suddenly gone quiet because apparently everyone had stopped their own conversations to watch us, she said, "Ugh, I'd rather kiss my dog than kiss you." Time did this weird thing where it simultaneously stopped completely and sped up all at once. I stood there, hands still on her waist, frozen like someone had hit pause on my entire life. My brain needed a solid 3 seconds to process what had just come out of her mouth, to confirm that yes, my wife had just compared kissing me unfavorably to kissing a dog in front of all her friends at a party where I was already the social outcast. The room exploded, not with gasps of horror or sympathetic silence, but with laughter. Full volume, can't catch your breath, slapping their knees laughter. Jennifer nearly dropped her wine glass. Brittany doubled over like she'd just heard the funniest joke of her entire life. Amanda was literally wiping tears from her eyes. Someone in the back yelled, "Oh my God," between giggles. Even Mark, my supposed ally in this nightmare, had his hand over his mouth, trying not to laugh, though at least he had the decency to look a little bit sorry for me. Glasses clinked as people toasted to what had just happened, like Chloe had just delivered the punchline of the century. The music was still playing, but nobody was dancing anymore. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what I would do, how I would react. This was better than whatever garbage reality TV show they were all watching at home. This was live entertainment, and I was the main attraction. The fool, the punchline, the guy who'd just been publicly humiliated by his own wife. And me? I just stood there smiling. Not a real smile, obviously, but that smile you do when you're in survival mode and your brain is working overtime to figure out how to respond without making everything worse. I nodded slowly, like I was carefully considering her statement, turning it over in my mind, examining it from all angles, like I examine structural blueprints at work. Because here's the thing about being married for a while, you learn that sometimes silence is your best weapon. You learn that the pause, the moment before you respond, can say more than any immediate comeback ever could. You learn that while everyone else is laughing and celebrating your humiliation, you can be in your head doing calculations, measuring angles, planning your next move. I'd spent years at these parties being the joke, being the guy who didn't fit in, taking the subtle digs and the not-so-subtle mockery with a smile and a shrug. I'd played the role of the boring husband, the one who wasn't cool enough or fun enough or interesting enough for this crowd. I'd let Chloe's friends treat me like I was lucky to be included in their presence, like I should be grateful that they tolerated my existence at their precious gatherings. But something about this moment, about being humiliated in front of everyone, about watching my wife get celebration laughs for comparing me to a dog, about seeing Mark's pitying face and Jennifer's delighted smile, and all those women who'd been judging me all night now getting confirmation that yes, Daniel Cross was exactly the loser they'd always suspected he was. Something about all of that flipped a switch in my brain. You know that moment in cartoons when a character gets hit on the head and little birds circle around them? That's what this felt like. Except instead of birds, it was clarity. Crystal clear, HD, surround sound clarity about my entire life and this relationship and these people and what I was willing to tolerate. The music kept playing. The laughter started to die down as people waited for me to either slink away in shame or laugh it off like it was all a good joke. Chloe was looking at me with this expression that was half challenging, half satisfied, like she'd just won something. And that's when I decided, okay, if we're playing this game, if we're doing public humiliation at parties, if we're comparing our spouse to household pets for entertainment value, then let's really play. Let's see how funny everyone thinks this is when the guy who's been taking it quietly for years finally decides to swing back. I kept smiling, kept nodding, and prepared to say something that would change absolutely everything. Because when you've been building skyscrapers for 15 years, you learn a thing or two about structural integrity. You learn how much weight something can hold before it collapses. You learn exactly where to apply pressure to bring the whole thing down. And brother, I was about to become a demolition expert. The laughter was starting to fade into that awkward aftermath phase, where people realize they've been laughing at someone's expense, and now they're not sure if they should keep going or pretend it never happened. A few people were clearing their throats, taking strategic sips of their drinks, sneaking glances at me to see if I was going to cry or storm out or do something that would give them even more entertainment for the evening. Jennifer was already pulling out her phone, probably preparing to document whatever happened next for the group chat that I wasn't part of but definitely knew existed. I took my time. That's the thing about revenge, or justice, or whatever you want to call what was about to happen. Timing is everything. I could have responded immediately, let my anger drive the words. But that would have made me look defensive, bitter, like the loser husband who couldn't take a joke. No, this required precision. This required me to look completely calm, completely in control, like I was about to share an interesting observation about the weather, rather than drop a verbal nuclear bomb on my wife's entire social existence. I finally looked directly at Chloe, maintaining that same pleasant smile I'd been wearing, the one that probably made me look slightly unhinged if anyone was paying close enough attention. The room had gone quiet enough that you could hear ice cubes shifting in glasses, someone's phone buzzing on the kitchen counter, the low hum of Jennifer's fancy refrigerator that probably cost more than a semester of college tuition. "That's fair," I said, my voice steady and conversational, like we were discussing which restaurant to try for dinner. I paused, letting those two words hang in the air just long enough for people to wonder if that was all I was going to say, if I was really going to let her win that easily. Then I continued, "At least the dog wags his tail when he sees me." The effect was immediate and spectacular. It was like I'd thrown a flashbang grenade into the middle of Jennifer's carefully curated living room. The room went from awkward silence to dead silence. The kind of silence that happens right before something catastrophic, like the moment before a building starts to collapse when you can hear the structural supports beginning to fail. "That's fair," I said, my voice steady and conversational, like we were discussing which restaurant to try for dinner. I paused, letting those two words hang in the air just long enough for people to wonder if that was all I was going to say, if I was really going to let her win that easily. Then I continued, "At least the dog wags his tail when he sees me." The effect was immediate and spectacular. It was like I'd thrown a flashbang grenade into the middle of Jennifer's carefully curated living room. The room went from awkward silence to dead silence. The kind of silence that happens right before something catastrophic, like the moment before a building starts to collapse when you can hear the structural supports beginning to fail. It was beautiful. Honestly, years of engineering training had taught me to appreciate the precise moment when forces shift and equilibrium is destroyed. Someone, I think it was a Brittany's wine glass was frozen halfway to her mouth, suspended in shock. Jennifer's jaw literally dropped open, and for once in her life, she didn't have a response ready. She looked like her brain had blue-screened, like Windows trying to process an error it had never encountered before. But the best part, the absolute cherry on top of this moment, was Mark. Mark, who'd been suffering silently through years of these parties, who'd been the faithful husband standing in corners while his wife held court, who'd been just as much of a prop in this social circus as I had been. Mark lost it. He tried to hide it. He really did. He brought his fist to his mouth and turned away, his shoulders shaking, making the sound that was half cough, half laugh. Then he muttered just loud enough for the people near him to hear, "Well, damn." That broke the seal. A few nervous laughs scattered through the room, but they were different from before. These weren't the celebration laughs at my expense. These were uncomfortable laughs, the kind people make when they're not sure if they're allowed to find something funny or if they should be offended on someone's behalf. Chloe's face went through several colors in rapid wouldn't accept her expired coupon. Her jaw was so tight I could see the muscles working in her cheeks. Her eyes were doing that thing where they got really wide and really focused, like a predator locking on to prey. Except in this case, I was the prey who'd just grown claws. But I wasn't done. See, I'd spent years watching these people operate, learning their patterns, understanding their dynamics. I knew that one good comeback might get a laugh, but it could be dismissed as a lucky shot, a fluke, the boring husband getting in one decent line by accident. If I wanted this to stick, if I wanted them to realize that I wasn't someone to be casually dismissed and mocked anymore, I needed to drive the point home with absolute clarity. So, while everyone was still processing the first hit, while Chloe was still formulating her response, while the social power structure of this ridiculous friend group was still wobbling on its foundation, I took another casual sip of my beer. Just a small sip, nice and easy, like I had all the time in the world, like I was savoring the moment, which I absolutely was. Then I added, with the same conversational tone you'd use to comment on the weather or compliment someone's shoes, and come to think of it, the dog doesn't fake headaches either. Boom! Tactical nuke deployed. Direct hit on target. No survivors. The room absolutely erupted, but this time it was chaos instead of coordinated laughter. People were gasping, choking on their drinks, and someone in the back, I'm pretty sure it was Kevin, Brittany's husband, who I'd spoken to maybe twice in my entire life, yelled, "Oh shit!" loud enough that it echoed off Jennifer's vaulted ceilings. Mark completely gave up on maintaining composure. He was bent over, hands on his knees, laughing so hard that no sound was coming out. His face was red, tears were streaming down his cheeks, and Jennifer was shooting him death glares that he was completely ignoring because he'd finally witnessed something at one of these parties that made them worth attending. Brittany dropped her wine glass, literally dropped it. It hit Jennifer's expensive rug with a dull thud and splashed red wine everywhere. But nobody even noticed because they were all too focused on what had just happened. Some people were laughing, real, genuine laughter, not the performative kind from earlier. Others looked absolutely scandalized, like I'd just revealed government secrets or admitted to a crime. Amanda's mouth was hanging open so wide, you could have parked a truck in there. Brittany was frantically looking between me and Chloe like she was watching a tennis match. Kevin was high-fiving the guy next to him, some dude whose name I never learned, but who was apparently Team Daniel in this moment. The best reactions, though, were from the other husbands in the room. These guys, these poor bastards who'd been standing around all night pretending to care about conversations they had no interest in, who'd been the silent furniture in their wives' social performances, they were looking at me like I'd just stormed the beaches of Normandy, like I was some kind of hero, a rebel alliance fighter who just landed a critical hit on the Death Star. One of them, Paul, who was married to one of Chloe's work friends, mouthed, "My man," at me and gave me a subtle nod that carried years of shared suffering and newfound respect. Another one raised his beer bottle in my direction in a silent toast. But Chloe, oh man, Chloe looked like she was about to achieve nuclear fusion. Her face had gone beyond purple into some color that didn't exist in nature, on a marathon, except the only exercise she was getting was trying to restrain herself from committing murder in front of witnesses. Jennifer finally found her voice, probably feeling like she needed to regain control of her party before it completely devolved into chaos. "Okay, everyone, let's just," she started, using her best corporate mediator voice. But I wasn't about to let her diffuse this situation with some diplomatic nonsense. I raised my beer bottle slightly, not quite a toast, but not quite nothing either, and looked around the room at all these people who'd been judging me, mocking me, treating me like I was lucky to breathe the same air as them. My smile was genuine now, not forced, because for the first time in years at one of these gatherings, I was actually enjoying myself. "Cheers, folks," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room despite not raising it at all. "Seems like it's been in short supply around here." The laughter that followed wasn't at anyone's expense, except Chloe's. And maybe that should have made me feel guilty, but honestly, after years of being the punching bag, after countless parties where I was the joke, after tonight where my own wife publicly humiliated me for entertainment, I felt nothing but satisfaction. I took another sip of my beer and caught Mark's eye. He was still grinning like an idiot, and he gave me a thumbs up that his wife definitely saw and would definitely punish him for later. "Worth it," his expression said. "Totally worth it." Chloe finally found her voice, though it came out strangled and tight. "We're leaving," she announced to nobody in particular, or maybe to everyone at once. "Now? Sounds good to me," I replied cheerfully, because at this point, why not commit fully to the bit? I've got an early morning anyway. Buildings don't design themselves. As we headed toward the door, I could hear the room exploding behind us with frantic, whispered conversations. This would be the story they talked about for months, maybe years. The night boring Daniel Cross finally snapped and took down Chloe in front of everyone. The night the social hierarchy got flipped upside down. The night someone finally said what all those other husbands were thinking, but never had the balls to say. I grabbed my jacket from the coat rack, nodded politely to Jennifer, who looked like she was still trying to process what had just happened to her perfect party, and followed my furious wife out into the night. The cool air hit my face, and I took a deep breath. That was the night everything changed. That was the moment I remembered that I didn't have to be anyone's punching bag, that respect is something you take, not something you beg for. And honestly, I'd never felt more alive. The walk from Jennifer's front door to our car in the driveway was approximately 30 feet, but it felt like one of those death marches you see in movies where the condemned prisoner is being led to their execution. Except in this case, I wasn't sure who was the prisoner and who was the executioner. Chloe was walking about 3 paces ahead of me, her heels clicking against the concrete with sharp, angry precision that probably would have punctured the driveway if it were possible. Each step sounded like a tiny declaration of war. I hit the unlock button on the key fob, and the car chirped cheerfully, completely unaware of the domestic nuclear winter it was about to witness. Chloe yanked open the passenger door with enough force that I'm surprised she didn't rip it off the hinges, threw herself into the seat, and slammed the door so hard that the whole vehicle shook. Real mature stuff, very composed and dignified. Exactly what you'd expect from a marketing executive who prides herself on her professional image. I took my time getting in because, honestly, I was still riding the high of what had just happened. My hands weren't even shaking, my heart rate was normal. I felt calm, centered, like I'd just finished a really good workout or solved a particularly complicated structural problem at work. This must be what skydivers feel like after they jump, that mixture of adrenaline and accomplishment and the knowledge that you just did something that scared the hell out of you, but you survived anyway. I settled into the driver's seat, adjusted my mirrors, even though they didn't need adjusting, and started the engine. The radio came on automatically, some classic rock station playing a song about freedom that felt almost too on the nose to be a coincidence. I turned it down to a low hum, buckled my seatbelt with deliberate slowness, and checked my blind spots like I was taking my driver's test again. The whole time, Chloe sat there vibrating with rage, staring straight ahead through the windshield, like if she looked at me, she might actually explode. I backed out of the driveway smoothly, gave a friendly wave to Jennifer, who was watching from her front window like this was the most dramatic thing to happen in her neighborhood since someone's teenager egged a mailbox, and headed home. The street was quiet, lined with those fancy gas lamps that HOAs love because they make everything look like a movie set. Nice houses, perfect lawns, the American dream wrapped up in mortgage payments and the crushing weight of keeping up appearances. The silence in the car was so thick you could have cut it with a knife and served it for dinner. It wasn't just quiet, it was aggressively silent, weaponized silence. The kind of silence that has its own gravitational pull. I could hear everything, the hum of the tires on asphalt, the quiet whoosh of the air conditioning, my own breathing, the occasional creak of the leather seats when one of us shifted position. Even the car itself seemed uncomfortable, like it was caught in the middle of a domestic dispute it wanted no part of. I found myself humming along to the radio, just quietly under my breath. Some Tom Petty song about not backing down, which again felt like the universe was having a laugh at our expense. Or maybe just at Chloe's expense now, which was a refreshing change of pace. I was in a genuinely good mood, possibly the best mood I'd been in at any point during our marriage in the last 2 years. There's something liberating about finally standing up for yourself after years of taking it on the chin. It's like that feeling when you finally scratch an itch that's been bothering you for hours. Except the itch was my dignity, and the scratching was publicly destroying my wife's social standing. Chloe's reflection in the passenger window was doing this thing where it looked even angrier than her actual face, if that was possible. Her jaw was clenched so tight she was probably going to need dental work. Her arms were crossed over her chest in that universal body language for, "I am extremely pissed off and you should be very worried." Except I wasn't worried at all, which probably made her even more angry. We hit a red light about halfway home, and the silence somehow got even more intense. I could feel her wanting to say something, the words building up inside her like pressure in a volcano right before it erupts. I glanced over at her, curious to see if she was going to blow, but she just stared straight ahead, her lips pressed together in a thin line, her nostrils flaring slightly with each breath. The light turned green, and we continued our journey through suburban purgatory, past the organic grocery store where everything costs 3 times what it should, past the yoga studio where Chloe went twice a week to find her center, which apparently didn't include any center that involved being a decent human to her husband, past the Starbucks where her friends probably gathered to gossip about people who weren't there to defend themselves. About 3 blocks from our house, she finally broke. I'd been wondering when it would happen, curious about what form it would take, whether she'd go for volume or venom or some combination of the two. "You embarrassed me." Her voice came out like a hiss, low and venomous, each word carefully enunciated, like she was teaching English to someone who'd never heard the language before. I didn't respond immediately. I checked my mirrors, used my turn signal, because, unlike some people, I still had basic courtesy even in tense situations, and made the turn onto our street. Our house was 4th on the left, a nice 2-story with a yard that I actually maintained myself, because paying a lawn service seemed excessive when I had 2 functioning arms and a mower. "Oh," I finally said, my tone pleasant and conversational, like she'd just told me about her day at work. "I thought you started that game." I could see her head whip toward me in my peripheral vision, but I kept my eyes on the road. Because safety first, kids. We were pulling into our driveway now, the motion sensor light clicking on and illuminating the front of our house in harsh white light that made everything look like a crime scene photo. "You made me look bad in front of my friends," she continued, her voice rising now, the controls starting to slip. Good. Let it slip. I'd been controlled and measured for years. She could deal with losing it for once. I put the car in park, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, my hands still on the steering wheel. The engine ticked as it cooled down. The silence rushed back in, filling all the spaces the engine noise had occupied. Then I turned to look at her directly for the first time since we'd gotten in the car. Really looked at her. At this woman I'd married. At this person who just compared kissing me to kissing a dog in front of a room full of people. At this stranger who used to be someone I loved. "Chloe," I said calmly, "your friends laughed harder when you insulted me than when Mark announced his vasectomy at the 4th of July barbecue last year. Remember that? When everyone got real quiet and uncomfortable? That was awkward laughter. Tonight, when you compared me to a dog, they were genuinely entertained. They loved it. So please explain to me how I'm the one who made you look bad when you literally started a public roast session with your own husband as the target." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like a fish gasping for air. She didn't have a response to that because there wasn't one. Facts were facts, and the fact was that she decided to humiliate me first, probably expecting me to just take it like I always did, to laugh it off and let her have her moment at my expense. "I just evened the score," I continued, unbuckling my seatbelt. "Actually, if we're keeping track, I'd say you still came out ahead. You got your laugh, everyone agreed you were hilarious, you won. I just made sure the victory wasn't quite as one-sided as you'd planned." I got out of the car, closed the door with normal, non-aggressive force, because I'm not a child, and headed toward the house. I could hear her getting out behind me, her heels clicking against the driveway, but I didn't wait. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and was immediately greeted by Buddy, our golden retriever, who was doing his usual excited dance that involved his entire body wagging, not just his tail. "Hey, Buddy," I said, crouching down to give him proper attention, scratching behind his ears the way he liked. "At least somebody's happy to see me, right?" Buddy licked my face enthusiastically, his tail going about 90 miles per hour. Point proven. Chloe stormed past us and headed straight upstairs without a word. I heard the bedroom door slam hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. Buddy looked up at me with those big brown dog eyes, concerned, wondering why the energy in the house was so weird. "Don't worry about it, Buddy," I told him, standing up and heading to the kitchen to get him a treat. "Just some human nonsense. You wouldn't understand. Actually, you'd probably understand it better than most people." I gave him his treat, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and settled onto the couch in the living room. The house was quiet again, but this was a different kind of quiet. This wasn't the oppressive silence of the car ride. This was peaceful. This was the sound of not apologizing for standing up for myself. I turned on the TV, found a late-night baseball game, and stretched out. Buddy jumped up and settled next to me, his head on my lap, content and loyal and uncomplicated. Above me, I could hear Chloe moving around in the bedroom, probably rage texting her friends, probably already crafting her version of events where she was the victim and I was the villain. And you know what? I didn't care. Not even a little bit. I took a sip of my beer, watched some guy hit a double, and smiled. That night, I slept like a man who'd finally stopped apologizing for existing. The couch was surprisingly comfortable. Buddy kept my feet warm. And upstairs, in the bedroom we'd shared for years, my wife could stew in her own anger without me there to absorb it. Best sleep I'd had in years.